Okay, the title of this lesson is What Causes Manhattanhenge. This is your learning log. I highly suggest you get your notebook and you stop and jot and take notes, mostly diagrams, as you do this at the places where I say it might be a good time to stop and jot, because that will help you with your learning log. The tasks are just practicing and trying for the learning log. The learning log is answering the question, what causes Manhattanhenge? You're going to show the view from Earth and the view from space. Here we go. What causes Manhattanhenge? You remember at the beginning of the unit, we talked about twice a year, the sun sets in Manhattan on many of the streets. You can see it's set right between the buildings. Manhattan has very straight east-west and north-south streets. So this is easier for it to happen like Boston. Boston, this wouldn't happen because we don't go east-west, north-south straight. Manhattan does. So twice a year, the sun lines up perfectly to set right between the buildings on many of the streets. Okay. We're also thinking about Stonehenge or any other henge or any other phenomena, because eventually you're going to do this with your phenomena. View from Earth, view from space. That's not right now. Right now, Manhattanhenge. What happens? Well, same process. Okay. View from Earth. You must include labels for all important objects, important dates or time of day, arrows showing movement, sentence describing what your model shows. Now, you are not going to cut and paste a picture of Manhattanhenge like I did. I just took that picture to show you this is what we need to represent. This is the view from Earth. How do we do that? Well, I did very crudely here, just by drawing shapes. You could all do this probably on the computer and drawing much better than I could, right? But I'm going to label the important objects. I don't need to label, like I could label buildings because they're pretty, and the sun, right? But there are more important objects, and that comes with the movement. So here, yes, the sun should be labeled, but include important dates or time of day. What time of day is it? It's a sunset, so I should say that, right? But let's look at, so here's a sunset. This is the dates since 2016 of when Manhattanhenge has occurred. Twice a year. What patterns do you notice about when Manhattanhenge happens? What do we know about how that pattern of sunrise and sunsets happens over the year? Where in this pattern does Manhattanhenge happen? So it happens on these dates. But what's the pattern? The pattern is sunrise, sunset, right? Remember these? So we've learned over the course of this unit so far that over the course of the year, the highest point of the sun changes. In June, it's the highest. In December, it's the lowest. We've also learned that where it rises and where it sets changes. That Manhattanhenge, when it's setting in the west. But where in the west exactly? So in December, it would set here. In March and September, it would set here. In June, it would set here. What about May 30th and July 11th or 12th? Usually the 11th. Let's look. So when we label all important objects, we need to give those directions. Here's the east. Here's the west where it's setting. Here's the south when it's highest in the sky. It's south, right? Arrows showing movement. But this doesn't show Manhattanhenge. This shows really a June arc, right? We want to know, when does it hit right in the middle of those buildings? Whoops. Right? So December, it might hit right behind here. June, it's going to overshoot and hit behind this building. There's just a narrow sun. But every May and July, that arc lands just about here. That's what you want to show. What might I do right now? I might stop and jot. Okay. You want to make sure you have important objects, so the buildings are important. The sun is important. But the biggest labels that are important are showing why, in the pattern that we've seen of sunrise and sunset over the course of the year, why May and July fall right in the middle of that pattern. This is where they fall in that pattern. And then you write a sentence describing what your model shows. That's part of what you're going to work on. What does this show? But this is a good view from Earth model. You might be even more specific. Here's a drawing, right? The day before, it might overshoot and set behind these buildings. The day after, it might be right here. But during those times, it sets right here. That's the sun's path. Okay? That could be another way to do it. Notice I've labeled what's important directions, arrows of where it happens in the pattern, showing like we know it's going to happen here on those times because this is the pattern over the course of the year before and after it. Okay? All right. So labels for all important objects. And again, that's really going to be these arrows and the directions. I can label the buildings and stuff, but that's the directions. That's my view from Earth. And I'm going to give a sentence or two to describe it. Now I need my view from space. Again, need to label all important objects, include important dates or time of day, use arrows, and use a sentence. Let's see. Why does the sunrise and sunset happen? Well, the sunrise and sunset happens because of the rotation of the Earth. But this isn't asking why does sunrise and sunset happen. This is asking why twice a year does it line up perfectly between those buildings. And that happens because of the revolution of the Earth around the sun and the tilt of the axis. So your diagram and your explanations and your vocabulary words should include this idea. Nice time to stop and jot. Okay, what do I need to label? June and December, March and September, right? And I'm going to probably label my northern axis, right? But then that doesn't help answer when Manhattanhenge happens because May and July aren't on here. So I have to put May and July on here. There's May between March and June, and there's July between June and September. And now I need to explain how what's happening here in space causes this. That's what my sentence describing the model is going to be. What's happening here using those revolve and axis and tilt and all those important vocabulary, right? And how it connects to here. That is the learning log to explain Manhattanhenge. Good luck. Have fun.